Okay. Good evening, everyone. We do have a quorum here, so I'm going to open up tonight's Conservation Commission hearings. This is for Thursday, August 11th, 2022, Wacoit Meeting Room, Mashpee Town Hall. We are being broadcast live on local cable channel 18. Would you please stand and join me for a Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes, Marjorie.
before you get into the meeting, I just wanted to take a moment to thank everyone here, all the other commissioners. This is my first official meeting face-to-face as a new commissioner. I am grateful for all of the help that many of you around this table have given me over the last year, and grateful to the Board of Selectmen. And I wanted to so note and just give you fair warning that I intend to continue to pick your very fertile brains on so much that's so important here in the town of Mashpee.
Great.
And I'm grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. Let the fun begin.
Let the fun begin.
Okay, before we begin the hearings, Drew, would you like to cover anything in the pre and post agenda?
Sure. So just to go through a couple of updates, I'm going to hold off on the pre-post agenda funding requests that you see under that category until the end, just so it's probably have some prolonged discussion on that.
Okay.
So just a quick update on the Red Brook Road Culvert project. At this point, the latest status update is just ongoing grant research to look into funding opportunities for the planning and permitting and construction of the box culvert. And I'll be attending an association meeting, Seabrook Village Association in early September. And I did give an update to the Board of Selectmen at their meeting this past Monday night, just to bring them up to speed on where we're at right now, what phase we're at, and just all the events leading up to this point. So, yeah, we're just looking for, and I know we've identified a number of grant sources already. It's just a matter of identifying when the application starts and getting the paperwork through. So, and nothing new for the Upper Quashnet restoration. Ongoing planning phase for the full restoration scenario. So Horsley Witten Group is still working on gathering up data and creating conceptual plans for that restoration option. I do plan to, I will do this tomorrow, to send out some dates for our next bylaw review subcommittee meeting, and hopefully we can get that finalized. It'll have to be the week after next week, because I'll be on vacation that week, but
Okay.
we'll get the date nailed down at least for that. So, Johns Pond and Santuit Pond milfoil awaiting post-treatment survey of the Johns Pond treatment. So that happened about a week and a half ago, and we're just waiting for the survey results. There was, as the commissioners may recall, there was about 3.5 to 4 acres of area that still had remaining remnants of milfoil that was identified from the first go-around treatment. So once we get the survey for the second round, I'll distribute it to the commissioners. And then we have to sit down with the consultant and kind of go over what the strategy will be for Santuit Pond. And once that gets finalized, then I'll submit a notice of intent application to DEP to get that permitted as well.
Okay. Great. Okay, move to the first hearing.
Sure.
Okay, now calling the 6 o'clock hearing, Town of Mashpee, 491 Great Oak Road, proposed improvement dredging of Great River and Little River, Representative BSC Group. This is continued from 6/23/22 for a DEP number, and then continued again from 7/14/22 for consultation with Natural Resources. Do we have someone here to present the project?
It's not online. Paul McHugh.
Online, okay.
Hey, this is Paul. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Cool. Could you bring the plan up on the screen, or I have it on mine? Yep, there it is. Cool. All right, yes, so my name is Paul Mancuso. I work with the BSC group, and I'm here presenting the proposed improvement dredging within the Little and Great Rivers on behalf of the town of Mashpee. And so, essentially, there are a few areas within the river that have filled in with sand, making the channels a little shallow and unsafe for navigation. So we are proposing to dredge to a depth of 5, to a depth of -6 within the river in areas that do not already have those depths. And so we did a hydro survey using our boat and sonar to determine areas that did not have adequate depth. And so on these plan sheets, the hashed areas show the locations where dredging is proposed, and that would be to remove enough sediment to get it down to -5 dredge depth, say -6. And so essentially, there's one area at the where the two rivers meet in the Great River. That's the largest area, where approximately 5,570 cubic yards of sediment will be dredged up that area right there. And then if you move up the Great River just a little bit at the Town Landing boat ramp, there's another area that has filled in where it's proposed to remove 880 cubic yards of sediment. And then a little further up the Great River, there's one more section where we're proposing to dredge 3,189 cubic yards of sediment. Borings were taken within all these areas to determine the sediment characteristics. And so there is also one area in the Little River near the entrance to Hamlin Pond that will be dredged. That's 351 cubic yards. But the cool thing about this dredge project, BSC recently permitted and completed a project in Bourne very similar in the Pecasset River. And so these areas will be hydrologically dredged, and the dredge slurry will be pumped to the town boat ramp parking lot on Town Landing Road, where the dredge slurry will be pumped directly into filter bags, large filter bags laid out in the parking lot. And as the dredge slurry comes in, a chemical will be added to the dredge slurry that will cause the sediment to precipitate out, sort of bind together and precipitate out quicker than traditionally. And so there will be no traditional dewatering basin. Using the filter bags is a much cleaner and quicker way to dewater the sediment that gets dredged. And so in the town boat ramp parking lot, these filter bags will, the dredge will be pumped into the filter bags, and the water will exit the filter bag through the mesh filter, and the sediment will be trapped inside, essentially. And then once the bag is full, they'll switch to the next bag, and the bags will be left to dewater for a period of time. And once the sediment has dried, the bags can be cut open, and the sediment can be put in the trucks and hauled off. Overall, it's a much cleaner process rather than building up a sand dewatering basin in the parking lot. And it worked great this past year in Bourne, so we're looking forward to hopefully doing something similar here in the Little and Great River. There was one concern we continued from the last hearing due to concerns of an invasive sponge population in Hamlin Pond. BSC, my colleague Matt Creighton met with the Shellfish Constable in Mashpee this past week and discussed what was going on with them. Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution is studying the invasive sponges, and so this is also sort of working with them and determining what the sponges are going to do. But in talking with the Shellfish Constable, we would like to include a few conditions at his recommendation. I believe they were emailed to you, Drew, but the conditions are to help prevent a spread of the sponge population in the event that they're still around when the dredging occurs. So the proposed conditions would be, first, at a minimum of 6 months prior to scheduling the dredge coordinator shall consult with the Mashpee Shellfish Constable to determine if areas proposed for dredging currently have an invasive sponge population. second condition would be if the sponge population does exist within the dredge area, the shellfish constable will determine the best time to dredge that area, the appropriate type of filter bag to be used, and or if the dredging should be completed within that sponge area. And again, this information will come from the shellfish constable who is working with Woodhull Oceanographic Institution in studying the sponge population currently. And so the last condition would be that the shellfish constable may eliminate a portion of the proposed dredge area due to the sponge population and may request that the sponges be removed via dredge if possible. And again, this sort of management will be determined by the shellfish constable's work with the Woodhull Oceanographic Institution. And with that, that's pretty much all I have. I'd be happy to answer any questions from the commission or public if there are any.
Okay. Paul, I have a couple of questions. What is the length of time? Did you mention 6 months for the dewatering of the spoils in those bags to take place?
I didn't. I don't think I mentioned a specific time frame for how long it would take to dewater. I think it's generally much quicker than a dewatering basin. The bags would stay until they were dewatered and the sediment had been dried. There's not like a specific timetable for that. I think in Bourne it didn't take much more than a month, but that would be sort of determined on site once the bags had fully dewatered and the sediment had dewatered. Then it would be the bags would be cut open and the sediment would be hauled off site.
Okay. Is there loss of
But
use?
I don't have an exact time frame for that.
Is there a loss of use for the ramp itself? If you're in there working, are people going to be able to go in and launch boats?
I think we would try to time it in the winter when the boat ramp isn't in use as much. I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear the question. Was that what you were referring to?
I was just curious, is the time frame and if the ramp is going to be closed down?
The time frame that the boat ramp will be closed down?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so generally with dredging time of year restriction, I think it's usually in the winter to avoid avoid time of year restrictions. So it would be in the off season. I mean, this would not be done in the middle of summer or something when I know that boat ramp is used all day, every day, and we would not be hindering the public access to the boat ramp during prime times, like in the summer or something like that.
Okay, thank you. Other commissioners that have questions or comments?
I'm sorry?
Oh, he's just asking if other commissioners have a question.
Are there any questions from those in attendance? Yes, sir. Would you come up to the table and tell us who you are?
Yeah, my name is Ed McGuire, and I live on Monomoskoye, and I'm wondering, from what I heard, I'm not sure if it's clear to me, but is the dredging of the entrance to Hamlin Pond based on the discretion of the shellfish warden?
Yeah, so currently there's some kind of invasive sponge population within Hamlin Pond, and we will be making every effort to not spread that invasive sponge. And so when the time of dredging comes, 6 months prior to that, the dredging schedule, we would reach out to the shellfish constable, meet with them, and there's a chance that I think the sponge problem is relatively new. There's a chance that they may not even be there at that point. There's a chance it could be twice as bad. We really don't know at this point. But so there would be coordination with the shellfish constable, and if there is a sponge population in that area, measures will be taken to prevent spreading the sponges, and what those measures may be are mostly up to the shellfish constable and what they learn from working with the Woodhull Oceanographic Institution. But so yeah, the area near Hamlin Pond may be subject to whatever conditions the shellfish constable is feeling necessary at the time, depending on the sponge population.
Are we talking about the entrance? Are we talking someplace deeper in Hamlin Pond?
If you look on the sheet, yeah, you can zoom in right there where it says
Yeah.
B10 and B11, a little to the left of that is where we are proposing dredging, yeah, right there.
So is it whose responsibility is to determine whether the shellfish warden has the right to do that? Is the Conservation Commission, do they get involved in what he's deciding?
So we do have a regulation under our wetland bylaw that is entitled shellfish. And in that regulation, the commission is encouraged to take the recommendations of the town shellfish constable as, if he makes a recommendation for a particular project, to condition it and include it as a condition of approval.
So he has the final word.
He has the, well, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that he couldn't be questioned at all or things like that, but in this case, I've been, communicating with the shellfish constable. I've seen the sponges myself on another potential dredge project we reviewed a few months ago. And so I have no doubt that he is talking from experience, and this is trying to err on the side of caution, not to spread it further than it already is, so,
Okay, thank you.
sure.
Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, Drew?
So, Paul, I just had a couple of questions. You mentioned it was hydraulic dredging. Is that, is there a mechanical dredge component? I think I saw that in the narrative, but I wasn't sure if that was just a backup kind of thing, or?
I think that's more of a backup thing. I'm not sure how the idea would be use hydraulic dredging so that you could pump it into the filter bags,
Right.
and add the chemical in that would precipitate out the sediment quicker. That's the main idea. That's what we're going for, is hydraulic dredging to pump it into the filter bags.
Okay. And my other question is just curiosity, because in previous dredge projects, we've had dredge spoil reuse for beach nourishment. Was that a consideration of this? And I'm not, questioning the decision-making or anything like that, just out of curiosity, in lieu of the expense of trucking it to a landfill, was there any discussion on reuse as spoils, as nourishment?
I believe there was discussion. I was talking to Matt earlier, and he was saying that it is not going to be used for beach nourishment. And that may have been based on the results of the sediment borings that were done. Maybe it's too high silt content. I forget exactly what the reasoning was, but I know that they considered it but decided against it.
Okay.
It might have been the silt content or something like that.
Okay.
I could check for you to get a more definitive answer.
Yeah, I was just curious. I know they usually, in previous, nearby, it was Callie's Beach, I think, at the end of Willsworth Road, where some of the dredge spoils were deposited from dredging in this area. But, yeah, just out of curiosity. So just a couple of other comments just for the commissioners. Paul had gone over some of the conditions from the shellfish constable, but there were 3 additional conditions that he included in the letter that he submitted, the email he submitted to us. He also recommends siltation curtains be used in the various dredge areas to prevent smothering of shellfish stocks downriver from siltation. All time of year restrictions laid out by Division of Marine Fisheries for the preservation of winter flounder breeding ground should be followed. And prior to the commencement of work and after any major pipe configuration change, the dredge coordinator shall consult with the Mashpee Shellfish Constable to ensure no undue impacts to the fishery or adjacent aquaculture sites. So we haven't received, and Paul, I don't know if you've received anything. Have you received a letter from Division of Marine Fisheries yet on this? I didn't see one in our records, but.
No, just an email a while back saying they received the notice of intent and are beginning their review process, but I have not received anything since then. That was back in June.
Right. And we did get the letter from National Heritage that indicated there is no take, so they don't have any conditions on this. So the only thing we're waiting for is just Division of Marine Fisheries, which will likely have, as Donovan had mentioned in his comments, a time of year restriction to not to avoid any impacts on winter flounder breeding season. So that will most likely restrict it to the winter months, which is typical of any dredge project. So my recommendation is that the commission should close an issue with the conditions as stated from the Shellfish Constable and any conditions or recommendations submitted by Division of Marine Fisheries once we receive their sign-off letter,
Okay.
their review letter.
A point of clarification, the silt curtains, is that our recommendation, or does that come from the Shellfish?
That's Shellfish Constable.
Shellfish
Yep.
Constable, okay.
Yeah. There are some areas of shellfish beds that are near the dredge footprint. It's not everywhere, so that's why he just said in areas where he would deem it necessary.
Yep. Okay. All right. Any further questions or comments from the commission? There being none, this is a notice of intent. I'll entertain a motion if there is one.
I'll make a motion to close an issue for 491 Great Oak Road with the conditions from the Shellfish Constable and Division of Marine Fisheries, including any of their conditions.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Charlie. Any further discussion before I call for a vote from the commission? Okay, there being none, do a roll call vote. Tom?
Aye.
Thank you. Alex?
Yes.
Thank you. Marjorie?
Yes.
Thank you. Charlie?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Motion carries.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thank you. I'll reach out to DMF and see where they are, and I'll get back to you about the beach management question. But thank you.
Okay, sounds good.
You. Now calling the 6:03 hearing, David Sarkeesian, 4 Metacomet, proposed risk of tree removals. Representative is the homeowner. This is an RDA. Thank you, sir. Could you come up and, for the record, tell us who you are? And
David Sarkisian, 4 Metacomet, Mashpee, Mass.
welcome. Tell us a little bit about your request.
Okay, my yard is very small, a third of an acre, and I have 57 trees. If you looked at my yard, it's heavily treed. I've had issues with my insurance company. They're complaining about the staining of the roof. I've had squirrels chewing on the fascia boards and whatnot, so they're threatening not to renew my policy unless I do a little bit. And I need a little bit more storage for a boat in the backyard, and I just want to thin a few trees out.
Okay. All right. I'll open it up to commissioners that have any questions or comments.
I'm just looking at this plan from '89. It looks a little, is it still the same out there as it was in '89?
I don't know, to tell you the truth. I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah, it's, when I was walking around the property with the homeowner, I didn't really, there might have been some trees that were lost in storms since then or something like that, but essentially it looks pretty much like it,
These are all drawn on here, which is fine. I'm just curious if there's any other buildings or anything else, like if the footprints are still the same
Oh,
as
the footprint
89.
of the house or the trees?
Oh,
The house,
The footprint is the same. The only thing that's different, the shed is a couple feet bigger, and there's a patio in the back.
Okay,
But the house has not been added on to. It's essentially the same.
okay.
So Drew, you've had an opportunity to walk the property?
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't seen the property in person. What's your assessment of the safety, particularly along the water line there, of the tree removal?
What, I didn't catch the full.
I said, what's your assessment of the impact that the tree removal would have, particularly on the coast?
Well, the lot itself, it doesn't border the water.
It
So,
doesn't.
Yeah, it's more than 100 feet away from the nearest
Okay.
water body.
Okay.
But, so it's within the floodplain, it's within the 100-year floodplain.
Right,
And so Regulation 25, which is land subject to coastal storm flow or the floodplain, has standards for, a variety of activities that take place on lots within the flood zone. And then specifically to lots that are landlocked like this one, so they're not bordering any other wetland resource area. And so when you get into landlocked lots in the flood zone, it's based on the total square footage starting at 5,000 square feet on up to whatever the top square footage of a given lot is, and in increments of 5,000 to 10,000 square foot lots, 10% of the lot must remain in a naturally vegetated state. 10,000 to 20,000 is 20%, 20,000 to 30,000, 30%, and so on and so forth. So this lot is 12,800 square feet, so it falls within the 20% retention requirement, which, as Mr. Sarkeesian had already described, the number of trees that are being requested to be removed, which is upwards, I believe, of 22, right around there,
Approximately, yeah,
20
right,
to
yeah.
22 trees,
Correct.
is less than 50% of the trees that are on the lot. So it meets the standard that we have under that regulation in terms of vegetation retention on a lot within the flood zone. So,
okay, that's great, thank you.
sure.
Any other questions from the commission? Are any of the trees diseased or dead, or,
A couple of them, but most of them are not, no.
so the vast majority are healthy trees?
Correct.
Okay. All right, I'll open it up to members of the audience that would like to ask a question. There being none. Drew, any other comments you'd like to make?
No other comments. I think I covered everything that in one of my previous comments. So it is, there is greater than 20% of the lot will remain in a naturally vegetated state. And as Mr. Sarkeesian had mentioned, some of these trees are growing out over the roof. Other ones, like he said, he wanted to have a little more storage space on the lot. And some of them, smaller white pines on one of the, over here, near the cul-de-sac side of the home, are growing underneath larger oak trees, and by removing them, I think it'll help to improve the health of the oak trees. So they're starting to choke out the oak trees, so it's actually a good idea to remove some of that thick undergrowth in that area. So, no other comments.
And you have a contractor to do this work?
I do.
Okay. With insurance? Good idea.
And I'm sure any contractor probably knows this already, but when it comes to the white pines and the pitch pines, you don't want to have those cut until the end of October. Still leach out that sap in the warmer temperatures, and that will attract the bark beetle, which will do more damage to nearby trees. So any arborist would probably know that already. Or if they're going to be cut in the warmer months, grind the stumps out and don't leave any stumps remaining for the pines.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, this is an RDA, so I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move for a negative determination.
Thank you, Charlie.
Well, second.
Is there a second? Alex? Any further discussion by the commission? There being none, I'll call for a vote. Tom?
Aye.
Thank you. Alex?
Yes.
Thank you. Marjorie?
Yes.
Thank you. Charlie?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion carries. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Now calling the 606 hearing, Antonio V. Lorenzo, trustee, 66 Bluff Avenue. This is a proposed Title V IA septic system upgrade. Representative Shea Environmental. This is an RDA.
Hi, I'm Carmen Shea from Shea Environmental Services, here representing Antonio Lorenzo for 666 Bluff Avenue. The property currently has 2 failed cesspools, and so we're upgrading to a new Title V compliant system. We are in a 10 flood zone with no other resource areas around the property within 100 feet or more. We're proposing to put in a new tank pump chamber combo and a D-night system, well actually a tank with a D-night system, a fast 0.5 1,000 gallon pump chamber, and then a 3-bedroom leaching field that will be raised approximately 1 foot above the current grade of the front yard with a small retaining wall around it.
Okay.
Yep, that pretty much covers it. Oh, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the commissioners? We're good? Okay,
Obviously, this is a substantial improvement to what's there now, and the
Yeah.
D-night system's a pretty big bonus. I know that that's sort of the way of the world down the road.
yep,
So we're getting preemptive about it on this particular site.
great, thank you.
Good.
Any questions from those in the audience? There being none, Drew, would you like to comment?
Not much to add. As you can see from the photos, this is all, as Carmen had mentioned before, this is just in the flood zone. There's no other bordering wetland resource areas within 100 feet of the subject property. And you can tell just from the photos and even the image that it's almost entirely pre-developed, pre-landscaped, consisting of ornamental shrubs, grass, driveway, and lawn area here. So the only condition that I would say that we could put into the permit is that when the grass gets replanted and reestablished, that it be compliant with the lawn standards for rye fescue mix.
I'm sorry, repeat that?
If there's reestablished lawn from the excavation, that it meet the lawn standards under the bylaw.
Okay.
Yeah, which is a rye fescue mix. Other than that, I don't have any other recommendations for, or conditions on the project, and would recommend a negative determination.
Okay, thank you. Any last questions or comments from the commission before I call for a motion? None? Okay. Again, this is a request for determination of applicability. I'll entertain a motion.
I would recommend a negative determination with the coordination of the Conservation Office on replacement of lawn.
Thank you, Charlie. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Alex. Any other discussion before I call for a vote? There being none? Tom?
Excuse me. Aye.
Thank you. Alex?
Yes.
Thank you. Marjorie?
Yes.
Thank you. Charlie?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion carries.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Have
as
a good
well.
one.
Now calling the 609 hearing, Linda H. and David A. Pierce, 44 Waterway, propose raise and replace single-family dwelling with a new patio, pool, dry wells for roof runoff, a rinse station, AC and generator pads, landscape, hardscape, new driveway, and upgraded Title V septic system, no increase in flow. Representative, Cape and Islands Engineering, this is an NOI. Good evening.
Good evening. For the record, Raul Lizardi from Cape and Islands Engineering and landscape architect Andrew from Yarmouth Port Design, representing the applicant, Mr. and Mrs. Pierce, for their project of a complete raise and rebuild of a single-family dwelling. So the project consists of a complete tear down of the existing dwelling and rebuilding a new 3-bedroom dwelling, no increase in number of bedrooms, therefore no increase in wastewater flow. The new house will be set back further from the road than compared to the existing one, but it is still going to be located within the 50 and 100-foot buffer to the coastal bank and the wetlands along the channel. The Wetland Resources is the channel, which is land under the ocean, also land containing shellfish. There's a coastal bank that consists of a man-made bulkhead. There is a salt marsh to the property on the north, the adjacent property to the north, and there is land subject to coastal storm flowage, the 100A flood zone. So the property, as I mentioned, it stays within the 50 to 100 buffer zone, but there is an increase compared to the existing development within the same 50 to 100 square foot, buffer zone area. The increase is roughly close to 1,700 square feet. So in accordance to the regulation bylaws, we have 1,700 square feet of proposed mitigation to compensate at 1-to-1 the increase in development. This house will be better constructed in that it will follow current building codes and also current floodplain construction requirements. The current house predates those requirements, so it's a substandard construction. Also, there is an existing septic system tucked to the northwest corner of the property. The proposed new septic system will be a Title V with enhanced nitrogen removal, so it is an improvement. We know that this board is looking towards those type of septic systems, so we approached the homeowner ahead of time to make them aware of this, and they were in agreement that they will do so. So this is an enhanced nitrogen removal septic system with no increase in design flow. It meets all the setbacks from the Board of Health and the Title V requirements for setbacks to property lines, to foundations, to crawl spaces, and to the waters of the channel. There was a letter submitted on behalf of the abutter by Arlene Wilson, who's also in the public tonight. We received the letter and we reviewed it. In the past couple of days, we went to the site and we discussed within the design team of the comments that were raised or the issues that were raised on that letter, and came up with a letter that we submitted to answer and make peace with what we understand is a good construction and a good project. Some of the comments, if I recap on them, were basically 4 issues. One of the issues was construction of the pool. The backyard at this location is roughly elevation 7. This pool is going to be a 5 to 6 foot deep pool. So the bottom of this pool excavation is going to be around elevation 1, between 0.5 to 1.5. We did a test pit just last week at this location, and we dug down to elevation 1, and we did not find groundwater. But that's not to say that the spring, what they call the king tide, or the spring high tides, would reach probably elevations of 2. We do know that because we surveyed the abutter to the north, which is the one that has some of the concerns. And we did a test bid on that property last year, and we presented that project before this board for the septic system upgrade on their property. So high groundwater could reach up to 2.3 feet. So there is a submittal that we did that shows a methodology of a dewatering, should that be the case. We believe that most of the construction can be done without the need for dewatering. An example for this was a project in 2017, I believe, right across the channel for a pool that was deeper, and there was dewatering done. So there is a proper way of dewatering with a dewatering pit, siltation basins that can control any of the dewatering flow and also protect the channel and the resources. Another comment was based on the existing trees on the abutter's property. The plan we submitted when the survey was done, they were tagged as 14-inch trees. In reality, they are like 20-inch tree sizes. They are all located on the abutter to the north, so they are not going to be cut from this project. But there's concerns that because of the proximity of some of the excavation for the new foundation, some of the root system may be affected. That's actually a case for any project that requires excavation. There's always going to be roots in the middle of the excavation that will be excavated with the excavation, but we're not proposing to remove those trees. So we believe that the work that we're doing with a foundation that's actually further from the property line than the existing house is not going to harm these trees that are on the abutter's property. Another comment is, it's a situation that is not always the case, but it's not really that uncommon. It is actually more common with waterfront properties that share retaining walls. Well, these two properties, there is a timber wall that is shared between the two properties. The wall itself is kind of built to hold back some ornamental planting beds and a couple of stairs to get from the front yard to the backyard. On the neighbor's property, the wall is roughly 2 layers or 2 rows of the timber logs or the timber material. So it's roughly about 12 inches high. So it's not really a large retaining wall. By the time this timber wall reaches our property or our client's property, which is set slightly lower, it is also built higher. And what is holding behind it is just planting beds, just ornamentals. So there was concern that the reconstruction or the removal of these timber steps and construction of new steps and kind of affecting that timber wall is going to affect the neighbor property, but we don't anticipate that that will be the case. The timber wall on the neighbor's property will be transitioned onto the new walls and the new stairs for the subject property without interfering with the grades on the neighbors. The fourth item of concern had to do with the dry wells. Typically, you've seen dry wells in the design of a pit, a circular pit, and it's usually 2.5 foot deep, but it's about a foot below grade. In this case, we did not do that design specifically because of groundwater. So these are shallow systems. It's more of the plastic chambers that you see for septic systems. It's roughly a foot tall with 6 inches of stone underneath it. So it's a much shallower system because we anticipate groundwater could reach up to 2 feet or elevation 2 feet. So we want to keep everything above the groundwater. So we believe that this system for the dry wells and also for the maintenance of drawdown water for the pool and these dry wells is adequate for this project. The application included a site plan, which is the one that Drew has been showing everyone on the screens, and it also includes a landscape plan that was submitted for the application that better details the hardscape and the proposed plantings. So if you can see, the proposed planting is approximately 1,700 square feet for the mitigation requirement. However, there is another strip of existing planting along the top of the coastal bank that is from another order condition. We're not counting that as part of the mitigation, but we are redoing it. This new planting scheme will remove those prior plantings from mitigation requirements, and now will be incorporated into a new indigenous planting landscape. I believe that sums up my presentation. If Andrew has anything else to add?
I think the only thing I'd really would add is you can see on the landscape plan, there's channel drains. So all the hardscape around the pool is pitching away from the pool and is caught at the north end of the patio by where those chaise lounges are shown. And then it pitches toward the house where we meet the deck line right there, yes. So that's all being captured into the channel drain, which goes to that dry well that's just to the north of the, yeah, right, yeah. And some of the reason for you can see there's some retaining walls on the end of the house, and this is for the building height requirements, to make sure that we have the proper amount of fill around the house so that the basement is not considered a first floor. So that's the purpose of those walls.
FYI, we cannot call it a basement because it's in the flood zone.
Okay, thank you.
Then I also saw you put in a Vista pruning window as well.
Yes, and we kept the plants in the Vista pruning as lower plants for view purposes, and there's a little bit more varied strata outside of the view window.
Sure.
And I probably should mention how we're going to handle the tie wall that goes across the property line. The reason why it's really not called out, it's a little bit of a in-the-field decision on exactly where things get cut, but it will be cut on the locust side of the property, and the top timbers will come out to the point where if there's anything that's going to cause any fill to go over the property line into the abutter's property, we would stop there. The stairs the new proposed stairs that are next to that are kind of in the middle of what's currently the stairs now. So we don't need that cheek wall on the other side. And it's a little higher. There's a landing there. You can see 9.7 on that landing there. So that acts kind of as a retaining wall from north to south. So the only thing we got to really concern ourselves with is going from west to east. So it's likely that 2 or 3, maybe 4 timbers height will be left on that wall, and we'll just leave it that way. It's kind of out of the way. It'll be hidden by that plant that you can see there. So it doesn't have to be completely demolished.
Okay, we all set? Thank you.
Can I just ask, is the abutter here?
I believe so. And
Will we be hearing from the abutter?
we will, the commission will ask questions first, and then I'll open it up to the audience.
Okay, great.
So with that, I'll start with the commissioners for questions or comments that you might have based on the presentation of the project.
I have a question. The dry wells, I like what you did and I get it. My only concern is at some point they may become obsolete if with flooding events or if the water's rising. So I guess I would say even though they're there, if they're not functional at some point, then all water would need to be removed off the property. Like, I don't know how far in the future that'll be, but it's like,
Sure.
at some point when you're servicing the pool, it may have to be that it's pumped off-site if the groundwater level becomes too high.
So yes, so sea level rise is unavoidable. Right now, when I was on site, I measured down to those who are familiar with water shoreline bulkheads. There's a black stain line
Yeah.
that usually marks the what mean high water usually is. I measured down to that. It was elevation 0.3.
Okay.
The grades on the area where we have the lowest of the dry wells is elevation between 6 and around 7. So this is a shallow structure with 6 inches of stone below. The structure itself is 12 inches. So if we have a foot of cover and the structure plus the stone, we are going to be 2.5 feet below the surface. So if the surface is 6, we're going to be around elevation 3.5. We know that the neighbor's property has a salt marsh, and it's roughly at elevation 2.3. So we're still about a foot above that salt marsh. So even if the tides or the ocean rise gets to those levels, we're still going to be above it. We're just going to be skimming over it during those high levels. But at that point, this property is probably going to need something more than just dry wells.
Right. Yeah, it's weird to think about. Hard to think about.
I guess what I would ask, what's the depth of the pool that's going in? It's 12 by 24. Is this above ground pool or is it?
It's in ground, 5 to 6 feet.
Please go right down to it.
That's the depth of the pool, 5 to 6 feet.
5 to 6?
Yeah, probably going to be a 5.5-foot depth when it's finished. And it starts at elevation 7.3 as the coping height. I was involved, Raul wasn't involved in it, but literally directly across the Papaneset Creek from this is the Murray House at number, I actually brought the plan. At number 118 Waterway. That has, the coping height is at elevation 6, which is about 16 inches lower, and that pool has a depth of 8 feet. And that was constructed 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. Yeah, the plan is dated December 2016, and that was constructed. It did get dewatered because it did go into some groundwater there, and that was done with by digging a pit and pumping into the pit, and I think they used some kind of siltation bags. It was RK Fox Builders did that one.
Yeah, the dewatering process is not something uncommon. You not only see it for pools, you also see it for septic system installations. So it is not uncommon, but there is a proper procedure that can be done to protect the environment, and that is a dewatering pit with siltation and the hay bales or straw wattles with a silt fence backing.
I don't know if we had the picture of where that was or not. Did send it in, I think.
Where, what was?
The proximity of that other job, I think I sent in, I don't know if
Oh.
Rose sent in that picture or not.
Don't, if you did, I
That's
don't
all
have
right,
it.
it's not
Yeah.
important. But I do have that plan with me if anybody wants to look at that.
I've got a comparison question. The house you're taking down compared to the one that's going up, what's the difference in size?
I don't know what the square footage either way is. Honestly, I don't do the architectural design. I deal with the footprint, but not the overall.
Well, that's what I was referring basically to, the footprint.
So yes, footprint of structures, we're going from 3,500 square feet, 3,517 to 3,513. So we're reducing by 4 square feet.
4 square feet,
Structures, yeah.
okay. And what percentage of the lot is land subject to coastal flow?
That number I did not calculate, but the plan shows the flood line, And it covers probably 80% of the land.
Raul, I'm seeing the existing development is about 1,800 square feet, and the proposed is 34.
That's within the 50 to 100-foot buffer zone.
Okay,
Half of the structure is outside of the 100-foot buffer zone.
okay.
Have you been to the zoning board with this?
No, there's an application, I believe there's an
September
application.
September 14th.
September
Yeah,
September 14th.
yep, that's part of the building commissioner's comments, it has to go before ZBA.
Right. And it's not a conservation issue, but I'm just curious as to how you're gonna, how do you calculate without using land subject to coastal flow? Because that's in the bylaw.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
I believe it's 17431, the zoning bylaw.
So if a structure is built in the floodplain, it just needs to be built according to the floodplain regulations. So the existing structure is in the floodplain, the proposed structure still is in the floodplain, it's just that the proposed one will meet the floodplain requirements.
Well, I'll let zoning deal with that. Any other questions or comments from the commissioners? Then I'll open it up to the audience. Is there anyone that would like to comment or just give them a minute to clear out?
Good evening. Arlene Wilson, A.M. Wilson Associates, here for the northerly abutters, the tidal bombs. I hope you all have a copy of my letter and the pictures that were attached. And I do appreciate very much that Raul attempted to answer some of those questions. I still have some concerns about what's going on here. I know Raul said he had gone down and dug a hole in the backyard and didn't find any water at elevation 1, but I don't know where that hole was, and I don't know what the tide stage was at which it was dug. It's common to be able to dig a hole adjacent to a waterfront area, particularly where there's a bulkhead, and not get groundwater in the instant that you dig the hole. If you leave it open, it's more likely that the water comes up. And on the septic system plan for the tidal bomb lot, and I believe on this one as well, the adjusted groundwater elevation is listed as 2.6. So I do believe that that's at least 2.6 is the groundwater elevation that ought to be planned for. I do also appreciate the fact that it's possible and common to dewater a hole so that you can install pools and foundations and all of those things. But in an area like this, where it is likely that they will be in the groundwater and need to dewater, it's also prudent to have the plan in advance. If they're going to dig a pit to dump the water in, you need to know where that is and what its capacity might be, what the pump is apt to look like, how the siltation control is going to work on the overflow. And as a representative of the neighbor whose lawn is a little bit lower than this one and wide open to this construction site, we would like to know the answers to those questions before they occur. and know that the commission has those plans and has conditioned them in an order of conditions. The depth of the pool, even if it's only 5.5 feet, you're going to dig below the elevation of the bottom of the pool because the pool wall has some depth and you need cribbing to put the pool wall in and all of those things. So they'll be deeper than that. In terms of the drainage around the pool, the engineering drawing shows that whole patio area to be absolutely flat at 7.3. And so it was interesting for me to hear that there's a drainage channel that's going to run back toward the house, is I think what he said. So I'm not quite sure how they're going to make that work or what the pitch is going to be. It may be very, very shallow and so not something that you would show except with an arrow on the plan to indicate that there would be some flow, particularly where the engineering plan shows it to be flat. The dry well situation is similar. There's a big area on the north side of the plan where the grades seem to be missing, both the existing grades and the proposed grades. It's very busy, and I know how difficult that is to show existing and proposed contours at a 20 scale on a plan like that. But there doesn't seem to be a contour between the 6-foot contour and the 11, which is the limit of the flood zone on that plan. I appreciate the fact that on the landscape plan, there are some grades for the proposed construction. So there are elevations given for the landings on the stairs. And on the landscape plan, there's an elevation given for the top of the wall around that little patio where the AC unit is, that they're apparently using to make sure that the basement doesn't get counted as a full story. And it's shown as 15, let's see, I had it written down here. It's in excess of 15 feet, 15.2 as the top of that wall. And that's in an area where I think the existing grade is about 7 or 7.5. Even though it doesn't show on the plan, that's from being out on the site and kind of eyeballing it. So there's going to be quite a significant reveal on that wall. And again, the details for how they're going to make sure that cutting off the retaining wall that runs across the property line isn't going to cause a problem are missing. And if we need to coordinate with a return on the wall or something like that, we probably ought to know now. Also because that wall, the new retaining wall, is going to have a top of 15.2. That's in an AE flood zone. And it runs back to the 11-foot contour. That's an area where there's some grade. It's below the 100, so it's possibly part of a compound bank. And clearly it's not eroding now, so it's not giving sediment to any adjacent beach. Nevertheless, it's a wall on a coastal bank, and you want to look at its construction and what it is apt to do in a storm event, it seems to me. the dry wells, as I noted in my memo, are a concern. They are, or at least the one in the area where the shed is presently, is set pretty low. If the bottom is at roughly 3.5 and adjusted groundwater is 2.6, that doesn't leave much room for error. And there are no grades on the plan either for the tops or bottoms of any of those dry wells. Finally, if the dry well that's going in the area where the existing shed is also going to be used as an overflow pit for the pool, you want to make sure that it's got plenty of capacity. And the pool itself, also, as I noted, the top is going to be set at just a little bit above the still water 10-foot elevation, flood elevation. This is an AE zone. You can have a wave superimposed on that still water flooding of 1.5 feet up to 3 feet. So it is likely that the pool is going to be inundated with salt water periodically, and they're going to want to decontaminate that by pumping it dry, checking all the equipment, and then running the water back in. So you really want to make sure that the capacity is there for those dry wells, or that there's an alternative methodology for drawing down that water, even though the bacterial treatment is going to be ozone, which is better than chlorine, clearly. But once it gets salt water in it, they're going to want to empty it. Finally, the concern about those trees. The trees are on not on the Pierce's property, and it's hard, clearly, to protect them. But as you could see from going out there, those trees are very shallow rooted. That's a function of the groundwater being very high in the area. They're large trees. The roots would normally run essentially to the limit of the circumference of the canopy, unless there's a physical barrier in the way. The physical barrier currently is a little further away, I think, than it is going to be after this construction. Because when this construction is done, the physical barrier is going to be the retaining wall on the side of the house and the elevated concrete stairs. So it appears that as much as 1/3 of the tree mat is going to be disturbed. That's an awful lot. And so the potential for these trees to be lost as a result of the neighbor's construction is pretty high. I don't know what you can do about that. I don't know what we can do about that until they actually die. But I would think that the Pierces would be concerned, because if the tree mat is lost on their side, the potential for the trees to fall on their house is probably greater than it is for the trees to fall on the Teitelbaum house. So just something to consider. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the audience that would like to speak? Okay, thank you. Drew, would you like to?
Oh, were you?
Oh.
Sorry. So in listening to the comments just put forth by Arlene Wilson, I agree, I think there needs to be some additional detail as far as existing and proposed grades. And a better clarification on the dry well capacity when it comes to uses for pool drainage. Taking another look and just, maybe adding something in the narrative about the top of the wall, the retaining wall on the north side, the height of 15.2 feet of being in a AE flood zone, maybe just something to reflect any potential impacts of that retaining wall being within the flood zone. And as far as the tree root mass, I do agree. I mean, the way you look at tree root masses is usually they coincide with the width of the crown. So based on where the proposed excavation, it is likely that the root mass is going to be impacted to some degree and may compromise the health of the trees. So that is pretty concerning. I think that needs to be looked at a lot closer, even if it means bringing in an arborist to take another look and get an arborist opinion about, what it is you're preparing to dig out in that area and what the impact is going to be on the root systems of those trees. Because if their health is compromised and then you wait to see what happens over time and it causes damage to the neighbor's house, that's certainly something you want to vet out well beforehand. As far as my comments aside from what Ms. Wilson just brought forward, I did have some suggestions on the plantings, some of the species of plantings. They're all good species. They're all on the Cape Cod Cooperative Extension list of native plantings suitable for a coastal environment. I just felt that there could be, took a look at some other possible plantings in the area, and specifically creeping juniper be replaced with groundsel-bush, and the mitigation should include some tree-level species. So I'm recommending 4 to 5 shadbush in lieu of a reduction in pasture rows. So those are my recommendations to swap out those species. And I think shadbush and groundsel tree will do well in these. Groundsel bush will do well in this area. It's pretty wet soils in that, so I think those will just offer a little bit more vegetative strata. And of course, they can be outside of the proposed area of the Vista pruning. Covering the performance standards, so all the work is being kept outside the 50-foot. This is a property, as you can see from the images here. This is a property that's almost entirely pre-disturbed. You've got lawn going right up to near the top of the bulkhead where the coastal bank is. And this vegetation was actually a mitigation from when this bulkhead was installed several years ago. So to get mitigation, just going back to the site plan here, getting a buffer strip where none really exists right now is certainly something that the commission can take into consideration when it comes to expanded development within the 50 to 100. The complete absence of a buffer zone here compared to what is proposed of over 1,700 square feet of native plantings, I think is a net environmental benefit for this particular location. And then in regards to lawn area, any lawn that's going to be disturbed, which I would imagine will be most, if not all of it, from construction activities, that any new lawn be provided documentation that it meets the lawn standards under the bylaw. So, but I do think that based on the concerns raised, that there needs to be some more information provided on the plan so we can take a closer look. It is hard to see in that north area where the proposed stairs and the retaining wall, what the existing and proposed grades are. And I know it's a busy plan, it's tough to get that information in there, but I would like to see it just to That'll better address the concerns of the neighbor.
Elevation 7 right in front of that wall.
No other comments?
Okay, thank you, Drew. Raul?
Yeah, so just a couple of comments back. So there is proper grading shown on existing and proposed on both plans. And the reason for the submission of the two plans is because the landscape plan is more detailed into all the proposed landscape work and all the specific into the details of proposed grades for the patio, pool patio, the trench drains and all of that. So it is properly documented with this application for what's being proposed for grade-wise. It was made a comment that there is lack of grading between contour elevation 6 and the next contour elevation 8. That's because from elevation 6 all the way to the existing timber wall that's shared between the two properties, it's fairly flat. So the next contour, contour 8, just happens to occur at the same location of the wall. And then after that, we have elevation 10, 12, 14. So we have that on the plan. It's just that between elevation 6 and the wall, it's fairly flat, so there is no other contours to show on a plan. In terms of the idea of analyzing or getting someone to say what's going to happen with the roots, this is the first time I hear something about this. In this particular case, or in any case, any tree that's on a border property that's close to the property line, that has a canopy that spans over 60 feet in diameter, any project that gets developed on that neighbor property that is within 15 feet of that property line, would they have to go through the same review of what's going to happen with the roots? This is the first time I hear about this. I've never done it, and I've never heard of it being asked for any other project. And if it is done to this project, it is almost inevitable that it's going to be done for every project that has trees just on the other side of the property line. Because these oaks that are 14, 20 inch big, they become really large at the canopy size that it's going to probably cover 20, 30 feet onto the neighbor's property. So any new construction that it requires excavation, not just for foundation or walls, septic systems, that excavation disturbs roots. It happens all the time. And I've never been asked to analyze or study what's going to happen with the trees when certain roots are being disturbed or cut off because of the construction.
So what, if I could just clarify, I mean, you're dealing with trees on our neighbor's property. So I wouldn't say that that is a similar situation in every, in several applications that we've reviewed. You've got trees that are within the limit of work that are solely within property lines. No, we're not going to have an arborist go and look at that, or even like over dig areas. But the thing that triggers the concern for me is these trees are on the neighboring property. So yeah, I do think it's warranted. I don't think it's really asking much to have an arborist take a look at it, just to review it. I mean, is that a hardship?
I just don't know what is being reviewed.
I want to see where the root mass is. I want to see where you're digging and to see what degree of root mass is going to be altered from the excavation.
So ultimately, if the trees were to be compromised due to this digging and die, is it fair to say that we would want this homeowner to pay for the removal and replanting of a tree? Like, what do we ultimately want from it if that were to happen?
I don't really know the answer to that. I
Massachusetts case
think
law
it's a
comes
safety
into-
concern, and I want that addressed
Case
first
law
and
comes
foremost.
into play.
Okay.
And if there's a chance to scale back the excavation or, do
Shift
some-
it a little?
Yeah.
I see.
But also, if a tree on a neighbor's property dies for some reason, how is that going to be tied up to what was done on an abutters property?
You can tell, I mean, so I just had some work done on my property, and I could tell we had to redo a retaining wall, and we were trying to save some trees right next to it. Once we got into it and we saw the amount of root mass that we were affecting, it was pretty obvious that that tree was compromised. So I think like once you're doing it, you can definitely tell that it would be a direct result of this project that that tree were to die or be compromised within a year or two.
Right, but the root mass is not going to be visible unless you expose it.
Right.
So you could use, I mean, there are tools at arborists, like an air spade that could be used to show the root mass, where you can be pretty non-intrusive.
I have no objection to having the arborist look at it and everything, but I would point out that if you go to the Massachusetts.gov website about trees and abutters, a butter has the right to cut both branches and roots on their property. You can't have that as a hardship. You can't impose that hardship on a neighbor. It's a 1933 case. I forget the name of it.
Right.
But that's land law. This is a little bit different because we're also talking about conservation here. So I get it, and I think we can have the arborist look at it.
Okay.
But I agree with Raul. I don't think it's.
The other comment I just wanted to say is all these properties are in the flood zone. So a flood occurrence is estimated to flood all these areas. Now, that does not happen periodically. We haven't seen this particular areas flooded to elevation 7 in some time. But if it does flood, it will follow the same tragic situation that's going to follow a lot of the neighborhoods in these areas. So yes, if there is a pool and we have a hurricane and it floods that backyard, the salt water will just take over and everything will just be washed out. That's inevitable for any of these low-lying properties. But it doesn't prevent these properties from having pools, having patios, and having houses. In terms of the drawdown of a pool, the pool typical drawdown is for the winter to turn, to close it off. It's not completely drawdown. The drawdown is just to get the water level below the cap, and that is a volume that this type of drainage systems can handle. The drawdown is done with smaller pumps. It's not like you're gonna have a contractor sump pump that's trying to empty out a flooded basement. So it is gradual. So this septic system with the soils, sandy soils that we have on the property can handle those type of drawdowns. The septic system, the soil test pit that I did was located on the southwest corner of the property around elevations 12. So we dug down all the way to about elevation 1, and we did not hit groundwater. I did go to the bulkhead. It was happening during the low tide. And I did measure the water level at that time, and I did measure the stain on the bulkhead, which happened to be around elevation 0.6. I was also the soil evaluator who did the test pit for Mr. Tettlebon on the north. I did that last year, and I did the same thing. His property in the front yard is much higher, elevation 16s. We did a 12-foot test pit, and we never found groundwater. With Glenn Harrington, we did an analysis on the backyard to determine high groundwater. So high groundwater at 2.6 is determined based on the marsh elevations that we saw. We never found water at 2.6. It was just an adjusted elevation used because that's the potential for the spring tide. And because of the type of soils that we have here, sandy soils, the tide influence into these properties is pretty substantial. But those spring high tides happen probably 6-7 times during the spring. The dry wells, these are the best dry wells that we can do in this type of situation. Again, we can't go with anything deeper because we'll be too close to groundwater. We can't design something for what's going to happen 30 years ahead because this whole yard may be underwater. Who knows? But I guess if the board is looking for this project to be conditioned, we should just want to have some guidance as to what it is that we want to, the board wants to see us come back with. I understand the arborist to do an analysis of the trees and the root masses, but I just don't know any of the other comments if the board wants to see something different. I don't know what else to design for drainage. than what we currently have. I think it's an adequate drainage. For the retaining wall that's shared between the two properties, the portion that's on the subject property, it's going to be cut. Those timbers are going to be cut. A return is going to be done if needed, or some type of transition to the new wall or the new stairs is going to be done, and everything's going to be kept on this subject property. I don't think it's going to affect the abutter. And the item on the pool dewatering, we received the letter from Arlene Wilson this Monday afternoon. So we needed to have some time to actually review it and understand it and provide something as a feedback. So we did provide a feedback for the dewatering system. So there is already something in the files for this project on how it can be dewatered. It is the same contractor that dewatered the pool construction across this same channel. So we know it can be done. If the board wants that on the plan, I guess we can just add those notes. We do have a note on the plan about the dewatering system for it to be submitted to the engineer and to conservation for review. So it is possible. It's just that I just don't want this project to suddenly continue a couple of weeks and nothing that's presented for the continuance is relevant. At the moment, I hear that the arborist feedback is something that the board wants. I just want to know what else we're going to come back with.
One thing, I don't know if Raul mentioned, but I think you included in that letter about in the event that the pool needs to do more than just a little drawdown for the winter, about the pressure dewatering truck. Is that in there?
I did not mention that.
Okay, yeah, it was, Bobby Fox from RK Fox Builders gave me information about how that would be handled, and I think we submitted it maybe for Aunt Jane before, but he gave me about the same information as that, that in the event that the pool would need to be lowered more substantially, that I think he said a pressurized dewatering truck would be used, and he could provide receipts for showing that that was done that way. It's not a huge pool. It's 12 by 24, where most are 18 by 36 or 20 by 40 is a bigger one, but it's a fairly small pool and not deep as well.
And if the commission wants, I don't know if Drew had time to actually distribute the letter that was submitted, but I do have extra copies. If the commission wants extra copies, I can just hand this over.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, I got it.
I don't know how to make a motion on this one.
There is no motion yet.
I know, I'm saying I don't know how to make one.
You don't have to.
You don't have to.
I'm just
I'll
like trying to
call-
think of how we can move forward, but I like,
I will call for a motion. I don't know if you
Yeah.
want to make one or motion for a continuance. I don't know.
I mean,
There's a lot going on here.
if we can, if the report from the arborist is something that the commission is willing to take as a condition before any construction, that could be conditioned into a permit. If the dry wells, which I really honestly don't know how else to design them, but if the board wants a different type of dry well, that will have to be shown on a plan. The dewatering methodology is in the letter that was submitted, so it's already in record. So it could be added as a condition. I think from my point of view, the only floating item would be the arborist and the condition of those trees.
I would agree. I think everything else can be conditioned.
And what about the lack of the contours that was mentioned?
So the
You did
contours,
clarify.
they're on the plan. It's just that this backyard from the bulkhead all the way to the houses and to that wall, there's just one contour,
Right.
elevation 6. And it's so flat unless we show contours every half a foot, which is not typical, nothing we do.
Yeah, the elevation at the bottom of that timber retaining wall is all elevation 7, so the contours coincide with the wall itself. You can actually see them on Raul's plan, those like dashed gray lines that are right in the wall.
Yeah.
Those are multiple contours because of the height of the wall.
Yeah, it's just, when you draw it in the computer, it just follows other lines.
Yeah.
Can't do much about it.
Okay.
But on my landscape plan, I actually have spot elevations on the stepping stones. You can see them right on the stepping stones.
Mr. Chairman, can
Yes.
we identify as a commission all of the different conditions that have been raised so that it can be really clear what the motion would be moving forward? I feel like there were 3 or 4.
Well, we definitely had the letter from the arborist
Right?
to establish the tree map.
But what do we do with that? So like, how do we condition that? Because if it comes back that the work is gonna impact the trees, then are we gonna wanna talk about it again? So like, how do we condition that? I don't know how to, like, just keep it moving forward if what comes back from the arborist isn't favorable for how it's being done.
It's hard to predict the future. I mean,
Right.
What do you think
they'll come back, they'll say the root masses are there. And
But
as you say,
ultimately,
once you start
would we
digging.
just want them to pay, like, what do we ultimately want? I guess I'm trying to like think ahead. So if it isn't favorable,
September.
Well, by revealing the root mass, maybe there might be an opportunity to scale back excavation to save the trees, and you won't know that until you get that. assessment
right,
done.
so, but we can't just like close an issue with the condition that the letter comes in, because then we'll just have the letter in the file saying that. We like need to be able to come back and take a look at it once the letter comes
I
in.
see what you mean, yep.
Yeah, the if-then scenario.
Right.
If the board is more comfortable, if we get a continuance, we still have Board of Appeals to go through on September. If we get a continuance for the next available hearing, we can get this letter. First, we're going to review it. If it affects the design, then we're going to have to do some change for
Right.
But we submit this letter. Drew, I don't know, when is the next hearing?
August 25th.
August 25th. You think we can get something in 2 weeks?
I would think so.
Okay.
I hope
Yeah,
so.
on behalf of the applicant, we'll continue to that date,
Okay,
with the idea of obtaining this letter from the arborist, submitting it, and should there be any changes, and we'll just dress them up.
And I can address those plants as well.
yeah. And also, I think that in reading Arlene's comments and Cape and Island's response, I'm satisfied with how they've described dealing with dewatering, the location and effectiveness of the dry wells, and the information on the plan. So, you know, those sorts of things can be conditioned in the permit when this gets reviewed again at the continuous date.
We can continue, we can do it.
So can I make a motion to continue?
What would be the time for
6:06. 6:06.
6:06?
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to continue the 44 Waterway hearing to August 25th at 6:06 PM.
Thank you, Alex. Is there a second for that?
Second?
Thank you, Marjorie. Any other discussion? by the commissioners? Charlie? No? Okay, then I'll call for a vote. Tom?
Yes.
Marjorie?
Yes.
Charlie?
Yes.
I vote yes as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Raul.
Now calling the 612 hearing, Town of Mashpee, 95 Timber Lane Drive. Proposed construction and maintenance of stormwater retrofits and modifications. Representative, Mashpee Department of Public Works. This has been continued from 7/28/22 for a DEP number. This is a notice of intent.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So Department of Public Works is not here. I'm just here. I'm Ashley Fisher. I'm representing the Department of Natural Resources. So this location was chosen for our one permit design that did go through funding through the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program. The Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program and our consultants, Fuss and O'Neill, did an inventory of Santuit Pond and all of its stormwater issues. We did an entire survey of the pond based on elevation and slope, and this location was given a high priority. The MVP consultants were identified 20 locations, and there was 3 that were of high priority. This was the one that the DPW and the Conservation Department and my department decided to pursue. This is town-owned land. This is also going to be the first step in the steps to beautify the area. We are also looking for funding for the town landing location. Fuss and O'Neill were the consultants that prepared the plan, and I just wanted to give a brief synopsis of their statement on the design. The retrofit concept for Timber Lane, Lantern Lane, is a retrofit design consisting of 2 linear bioretention systems along the east side of Timber Lane Drive and an infiltration basin located east of the bioswales to receive overflow from the bioswales. The green infrastructure retrofits are designed to treat and infiltrate stormwater runoff from Timber Lane Drive and the 5-acre upgradient discharge area. The systems have been designed to maintain the reduced peak flows between pre and post development conditions, provide groundwater recharge and reduce runoff volumes, and provide treatment to improve the quality of stormwater entering Santuit Pond. Current 24-hour design storm precipitation depths were increased by 20% to account for projected future increases in extreme precipitation over the anticipated 50-year lifespan of this stormwater best management practice. So this bioswale will infiltrate approximately 0.4 inches of runoff from the contributing impervious area, resulting in a long-term pollutant load reductions of 83% reduction of total suspended solids, 60% reduction in phosphorus, and 74% reduction in nitrogen. So this was the first round of MVP funding where we did the permit design, and we most recently received funding to pursue the groundbreaking in this effort of construction. Do you have any questions for me? I'll try to answer them, but Fuss and O'Neill were unable to be here.
Well, first of all, I'd like to comment, it's nice to see a project like this come along because it's sorely needed up there. Any questions from the commissioners?
I will just add that this location did receive top priority based on what we saw in the field. On both sides, there's a revetment wall that was put in. It's just a cement wall that's abutting the upland bank from the pond. And to either side of it, stormwater was running down and damaging the bank.
Right.
So this swale and retention area will reduce that. and reduce flooding in the roadway that is seen by the residents that we did interview.
Okay. Any questions from the commissioners? I guess we don't.
Excuse me, I have a question. Is this area vegetated currently?
So the history of the area, it was deeded rights back in the early 90s where it once went to beach, or they did deposit sand. Currently, there's an Eagle Scout step down to the pond for a beach. It's really a residential dumping area right now. People are dumping their leaf litter down the bank. So
No,
it's a bunch of
I'm saying-
briars.
I'm saying where this infiltration is planned for. Is that treed? Is it a treed area?
It's really not, it's brush.
Yeah, it's
But-
mostly,
But I'm looking at Google there and I'm seeing trees.
yeah, it's a combination of trees and brush. Yeah.
So what are you doing? You're clearing you're clearing that whole area of all the trees and the brush to put in this huge infiltration system?
Yes.
It kind of looks like it'll be nestled in between the trees, like,
Yes. There will be plantings either side of it. We're planning on putting plantings in the future. It's part of a resilience trail that would connect to the town landing. So we're planning on, with the Conservation Department and pollinator gardens potentially.
But I don't understand the disconnect between what I see in Google and what I see shown on the plan. I don't see any trees like marked here, you know, where you have infiltration that are being removed, where they're going to be removed.
I don't understand the question. It's an infiltration basin that's being put in
No,
place.
I understand that, but this whole area gives the impression that there's no removal of any trees or brush on this plan.
Yes.
And yet you have Google images that clearly show that there are brush and trees in this area. I don't get it.
So under the plan requirements, if it's a tree, this is taken from Regulation 3. If it's a tree that's under 10 inches DBH, it should be shown on a plan. If it's less than that, then you look at a plan from the proposed work area or work limit. And I understand that there's, you can see here, this is the work, I'm not sure if that's the work limit or not, but the scope of work area, it's assumed, and I could point to any number of plans that have been improved in the past. If you've got trees that are under that DBH, they don't need to be called out. You have to say that in the regulation. So it's assumed that where you see the proposed scope of work, all that vegetation is being removed. If you want to have it called out on the plan, we can have the consultants go back and call out the trees, but they went by what's on our Regulations 3 plan requirements, and it didn't require that. So there are no trees in there that are larger than 10-inch DBH. So that's why you don't see them.
Tom, it might be helpful on 201, it shows the edge of the tree clearing. So it shows kind of the edge of where, like, the limit of the work. Is that kind of what you're looking for?
Which plan was that?
201, it's like the third one in, third page, second or third page in.
So they've got some of the trees called out to preserve because they are of larger caliper size.
Right.
So they're a seed tree, mature class tree.
Given, from construction, just my eyes as construction, it looks like this area is all being blown out, graded, and dug in this sort of mess.
To
sort of
create the basin.
Septic system. And so I don't understand how you could save any trees or brush in that area.
Have you been out there to the site?
No, I haven't. I'm just looking from reading plans for 30 years as far as simply looking at what would be required.
I'll just describe to you, it was previously cleared, everything there,
So it's already cleared.
it's been cleared in the past.
I see. So the Google image is not correct.
Well, the Google image is correct, it's brush that has grown since
I see.
since it was a beach back in the early 90s.
I see, but there's no trees anymore.
It's very minimal, it's brush.
Have we gotten a DEP number?
What's that?
Has a DEP number come in?
No, no. Still awaiting that. So the only thing I can really say to try and, I guess, and I understand where you're coming from, Tom, it's a lot of disturbance, but this area was vetted out as part of this municipal vulnerability program to identify areas of inadequate stormwater infrastructure and treatment.
No,
And this,
I get it, and I
Yeah.
think it's terrific
Right.
that, we need to go this way.
right,
But I don't understand why all of this is designed here and not caught at an earlier stage in the roadway and other places like this. Why they would locate all of this so close to the resource area. That's what I'm questioning. All of that storm drainage, we have major storm drainage problems in so many places. It's terrific that they're doing it. All I'm questioning is the location.
Right.
I'm thinking, well, why can't some of that be stretched out on the roadways? Why can't it be
Right.
caught before and allowing this area to be more natural and vegetated and more of a buffet of mitigation or something like that?
well, we could certainly put that to the consultants as a question, have them answer it directly.
It's just something that visually, to me, this seems like a major
Right.
disturbance.
And I can just briefly answer that, just because I know I did have discussions with the Department of Public Works and the capability of maintenance and the types of leaching catch systems that would need to be there to catch that volume of water. It would be, it wouldn't reduce any of the phosphorus. You'd need holding time.
I'm simply discussing the location.
And
That's what I'm
I'm
discussing.
trying to explain that. But, okay.
Ultimately, could the site benefit from like restoration anyway? It sounds like it's a
Yes.
dumping spot. Okay.
Well, I think it would be, I don't think it's unreasonable to ask the consultant. In their narrative, this project is really coming at a standpoint that they felt this was an adequate design, given the volume of runoff that this area experiences. I'm sure they must have vetted out other locations and other designs before coming to this final design. But if you want clarification from them as to what other alternative methodologies they looked at, and the potential to reduce the scope of clearing, or if they thought that was feasible or is feasible moving forward, or if they feel this is truly the best design, given the amount of treatment before this runoff is, intercepted, or as it's intercepted before it hits the pond, and the amount of phosphorus and nutrient removal that a system of this size and scope would result in as far as water quality improvement, then, I have no problem asking them that to clarify. Did you look at other designs? Why were they less capable, given the amount of space to reduce the amount of nutrients that this design is? I think those are the kind of questions that I would imagine you would want the answers to.
Just visually, it looks like a lot of disturbance, that's all.
Sure.
And certainly it's worthy, it's something that's needed.
Okay.
But I just look at it and I think, engineering-wise, if it's a public way and it's a road, why wouldn't you use the public way, elevate it? Why wouldn't you fill in that? Why wouldn't you distribute it? And then why not leave the buffer
Okay.
mitigated?
And there could be a very logical explanation for it. It could be, perhaps resulting in not as much treatment of runoff, or it could be cost-related, or a combination of those two, but I'm more than happy to get more information.
Well, it's not necessary. I certainly want the project to go forward.
Okay.
But I do notice that, and I think it's a lot of disturbance.
Sure. No, I understand.
Question? No. Do we have a figure for how much excavation actually will be done for that retention basin? Cubic yards?
I can't answer that question.
No.
That would be the consultants. They can.
Right. Any other questions from the commission? Charlie? Maybe he muted himself out of it.
Charlie, did you have any questions or comments?
No, you just said something here about a DEP permit. What was that all about? I really didn't hear that.
Oh, there's been no issuance of a DEP number yet.
Okay.
Yeah. So we wouldn't be able to issue the permit if the commission closed. They wouldn't be able to issue
Until the number's given and comments from the DEP.
Right.
Okay. No other questions? Drew, did you have any other comments to make before I?
No other comments.
Okay. Is there anyone in attendance that would like to speak? Yes, sir, if you come down and identify yourself.
So I'm in a butter. My name is Brian Everett, 77 Forest Drive. I have pictures of that area being a beach. That property, 77 Forest Drive, has been in my family for a long time. There used to be a beautiful dock down there. The neighborhood association kind of dissolved, and taxes weren't paid on it, so the town took that piece of property over. It was a beautiful beach. Nothing really happened to it. A couple questions that I have. The assessor's property card identifies this as a beach. I just don't know how the town can go and switch it up and blow out the land. All we get messages from the town, the people that live on the pond, don't cut your vegetation, don't cut your vegetation. That's going to impact the water quality, and then the town comes forward with this project. They're just going to excavate a whole bunch of stuff out. There's giant beech trees down there with 24 inches DBH, giant red oak trees down there. There is a lot of brush. I like the natural state of it, but this project isn't even 100% effective, right? It's 75, reduces 70 or 80% of this going into the water. What is this going to do to really improve the water quality of Santua Pond? Nothing. It's going to stop some of the runoff from going into the pond. But 80% of the problem we know is in Santua Pond already. So if we go ahead and with this project, am I going to be able to swim in Santua Pond next year? No. I mean, we have deeded rights to the pond, and in the packet that I got from, I think, Stacy, correct? The NOI and stuff like that, talks about putting a gate up down at the landing, not having any boats on the pond. And I don't know, this just seems like the town's putting the cart before the horse, really, with this project. It's not really doing it for Santua Pond. I speak at just about every single town meeting the last 3 or 4 years about what are we gonna do to actually improve the water quality. Stopping the drainage will mitigate some of the stuff going into the pond, but the problem is in the bottom of the pond. And the town doesn't have a great track record of cleaning up Santua Pond right now. And I don't mean to throw daggers at the commission, I apologize, but between conservation, natural resources, and the selectmen, I'm sorry, Brian, but there hasn't been any improvements to the pond. They want to take away boats from the pond because it's circulating too much water. Well, then why are the solar bees in there? Solar bees circulate water, right? So don't boats. Those are my comments.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else who would like to speak?
Can I just ask, Mr. Chairman, Would you like to respond to those concerns from your abutter?
I'll try to. I've said this over and over again. It's like beating a dead horse. 78% of that phosphorus got there through stormwater, septic system, road runoff. That's how it got there, cumulatively over the years since the 90s. It's not all of a sudden 78% of the phosphorus is at the bottom of the pond. It doesn't just happen overnight. We've been met with roadblocks for stormwater improvements, treatment, and an activation of the Santuit Pond. We can do everything we try to do, but it's clear at town meeting and the vote that nothing wants to happen at Santuit Pond.
It's very accurate, but.
Yeah, I mean, if I could just offer up a couple of comments. I know there's been a
Drew,
number.
when you make those comments, could you weave the history in here? Because these are all valid points on both sides, and I'd love to hear your perspective on how it's all been woven together to get to this point.
Well, the bottom line and the most poignant thing I can say is that the town is looking at every aspect or every possibility of improving water quality on Santua Pond. As Ashley said, it's not going to happen overnight. It takes studies, it takes a while to vet out what is the most effective approach or combination of approaches. So you've got a range of different initiatives that have been sent to town meeting, like the use of alum, which binds phosphorus and is commonly used to deal with toxic algae blooms on ponds that have high phosphorus content and have algae bloom problems. It got shot down at town meeting. And I'm not saying there weren't concerns that were raised with the use of alum. There are things to consider. You've got an ongoing dredge study that's being done by the Army Corps of Engineers and the tribe. So that's ongoing. You've got examination of stormwater, outdated stormwater infrastructure, which this is now a part of. You've got the identification of failed septic systems within 300 feet around the pond that's been going on and requiring upgrading of those septic systems or pumping of those septic systems. So there are a number of initiatives that are happening, and I think painting this picture of Santua Pond, the town isn't doing anything, is not accurate. The town is doing a lot. And it really just depends on the will of the public. When you go after funding at town meeting and an initiative gets shot down, then that's what the public who shows up at town meeting decides, and you're at the mercy of that, whether it makes sense or not. But the bottom line is that Santua Pond is probably the most heavily studied, looked at, and top priority in terms of water quality for inland water bodies in the entire town by far. And there's a lot of effort being put forth right now to try and improve the water quality. It really just depends on the will of the people and funding to get it done. And this is coming at no cost to the town. This is a grant. So the town isn't wasting money on this. This is grant funded, vetted out through a consulting firm that has experience in this arena. And I understand it's a lot of disturbance. I get that. But I think that if you're comparing this and, residents who are told, don't clear the vegetation in your yard, well, most of the time, the motivation for doing that is I want a better view to the water, not because I'm going to install a stormwater system and that's why I need to get rid of this vegetation. Different backstory here, not the same motivation. So I don't think when it comes to setting a precedent that people are going to look at this and say, well, I guess it's okay for me to clear cut my front yard because the town did it. You have to look at the reason why they did it. So I don't think that's a fair picture.
Drew, I don't think it's fair for you to paint the picture that I don't think the town's doing anything. I see that the town's doing things. I was part of the health department coming out and inspecting my septic system,
Right.
which it passed, and the other property that I own on Lantern Lane passed. We're responsible homeowners. I try to spread the word to my neighbors about, every 2 or 3 years. Doesn't matter if it's your summer home, pump your septic system out because it's going into the pond.
Sure.
But it's the success record that we haven't been able to swim in the pond for the last 10 years at least, and please don't say that I said that you guys aren't doing anything. You guys are. It's just that it's not being successful between solar bees and the, looking up for septic systems. I mean, when is the town going to go after Wakeby Pond? Wakeby Pond has the same cyanobacteria problems, but there hasn't been a health department initiative to go after the homeowners around there. What are their septic systems like?
Sure.
And it's always on Santua Pond. Like, you know, we're not gonna be able to use boats, you know, that's coming up for fall town meeting, like, it just seems the pressure's always on people, and it stinks that I'm the only one here that's on that 160 or 180 acre pond, you know what I mean? There's nobody here in the audience, which is tough for me. But, I don't know, I gotta speak my mind, right?
Sure.
And can I just try to just answer some of the questions on the motorcraft and the solar bees? So solar bees were installed to oxygenate the bottom. Their sole purpose is to prevent anoxic conditions that commonly are seen with cyanobacteria blooms and heavily eutrophic water bodies. The solar bees are meant to keep that phosphorus bound in the sediment and down and prevent them from resuspending, creating these blooms. Once you put a motorboat in there that's disturbing the bottom in excess of 50 horsepower, 10 horsepower, all of that bottom is being stirred up, phosphorus is being released, defeating the purpose of the solar bees entirely. We also did the study with Fussinonio. That pond can't support motorboats because of its depth and the interaction with the bottom. It's a very shallow pond. Its maximum depth is 10 feet. And based on vetted science and data that you can't have and support the healthy ecology of a pond more than 5 horsepower on that pond. And that's what was found at the MVP study. And that was one that the consultants really want to push because that's the one that they feel will improve the pond the most at this current time. And this one location receives the most stormwater based on topography and land use of the upland property owners. So it will reduce the phosphorus by the most. They did a whole survey based on public versus private roadways. We can only control the public roadways, unfortunately, at this time.
So we should shut down all bodies of water that are less than 10 feet of depth, so like Jehu Pond, Hamlin's Pond. We should shut down all bodies of water that are less than 10 feet deep to boats.
Nitrogen and phosphorus act differently.
It's nitrogen, it's a limiting nutrient in brackish and salt water, and phosphorus for fresh water.
There was a gentleman at the select board meeting the other night that spoke about boats on Santuit Pond. And I believe his comments were, there's a lot of bass fishermen that want to go out there in the fall.
There's many tournaments.
And I think he misspoke when he said that phosphorus isn't a problem in the fall. But in any event, I'm not aware of what the traffic on Santuit Pond is actually like. I mean, we talk about these boats. How many boats on a typical fall day are we talking about with bass fishermen?
There's usually multiple permits for fishing derbies on the pond. There's times where the parking lot is full.
Really?
With trailers, yes.
And it's all catch and release?
It's all catch and release.
No, you could keep a largemouth bass if you wanted to.
It's not advised.
I wouldn't want to go to dinner.
I own a boat, a kayak, and canoe, and I won't even go in the pond, but that's that.
Right.
So ultimately, I think this step is needed. I think we're lucky that this is on town property, that we can do this, that it's through grant funding. We don't have to worry about, you know, burdening town taxpayers. Thank you, Ashley, for bringing it forward. And I definitely hear your concerns. It's awful living on a body of water that is not clean, but we got to do something to start going in the right direction. And I think
I mean, I
Yes,
just
yeah.
wish we could do something about what's in the pond. Like, last year, you guys voted to acquire the cranberry bogs as an attempt to clean up the water. Are there any results from that? Are there any results saying that, like, yeah, we bought these cranberry bogs up, and now we're having improved water quality?
So, I mean, I think you have to think about the timeline. It takes, like, when the bogs are purchased, then we moved immediately into, and we got $500,000 grant from the In lieu fee program, Division of Fish and Wildlife. And you know, being from government experience, how long it takes to get plans together, to get timelines together, to get funding in place, to get all those things. So you're asking for results when we're not even halfway through that process yet, because it is a process.
Yeah.
So, but that is happening. That whole bog system is being restored to wetlands. We are in the final planning and permitting stages, and the next stage is construction. So by early winter, of 2023, the construction will be complete. And then you'll start to see studies about how effective wetland restoration of cranberry bogs to wetlands may be in improving and intercepting groundwater. But you can't find the answer to that until it's done.
Sure.
And it's processed, so it, you know, takes a while.
No, I
But
understand
that
restoring
is-
a
but
wetland.
that's- Yeah, that's
But
what's,
the fact that, like, is it going to improve the quality of Santuit Pond, I kind of
Probably not,
question.
but it may
You
to
guys
some-
advertise it as that, so.
well, I've never said it will improve the water quality of Santuit
can
Pond.
look- we can look it
I do
up.
see a benefit of taking a bog out of production
Sure,
that abuts the pond.
Less fertilizer.
I think you can certainly see the benefit in that.
absolutely.
And so that's really the direction where I was, or, you know, the value that I place on it. I never thought it would cure the pond's problems.
Well,
But
you're
it will
quoted as
cure
that.
some of the problems, and it'll certainly take a nutrient source right out of the picture, 11 acres worth.
Sure.
So that's, in my mind, is pretty significant as far as taking that out of the picture.
It's a piece of the puzzle. There's
Yeah.
a lot of pieces here that, and some perhaps that we haven't even looked at yet.
Sure. I'm just urging the commission not to
Yep.
go ahead with this project. It's not fitting for this, it's not applicable here. And yeah, it does get a lot of water runoff, but I just don't think it's gonna fix any problems really, you know, and it's not even 100% effective here in the numbers, 70%, you know, 60%, 80% here and there. So I appreciate you listening, so.
Very
Thank you.
frustrating.
It's one small piece of the puzzle. The ultimate goal is sewering for this pond, and that's what we need to happen. And we just urge everybody in the public to really, be on the select board and, really push for phase 2 to be implemented in and around Santuit Pond and its watershed.
Can I just add that Drew's point about getting to a certain level and then not getting funding because there's not enough people in the room to help make the decision is part of the grassroots lobbying that needs to be done on this issue.
I guess I have to be the spark plug in my neighborhood. You know? It's tough. It's really
I'm just saying, it's never easy, so I'm really sensitive to what you're saying.
No, I speak at just about every town meeting. You guys see me there. It's just, it's
So you got to
frustrating.
drag 12 more automobiles full of voters.
And we're really trying to make the area look nice for people to actually care about Santuit Pond. If you go down to the town landing, it's the town dump pit. People dump their trash. They dump their nip bottles. And this is the first of another project to beautify the area and actually draw people to see, let's do something about this, instead of being the pond that nobody really cares about in Mashpee.
I don't know, you're gonna put a walkway around a green pond. No one's gonna really wanna look at a green pond. I already overlook it. Like, it's kind of just a wasted project, in my opinion. That's all I
Okay.
have.
So there's no further discussion. I'll call for a motion.
I'll make a motion to close an issue for 95 Timberlane Drive for the town of Mashpee upon the receipt of the DEP permit number.
Thank you, Alex. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Thank you, Charlie. Any further discussion before I do a roll call? There being none? Tom?
Aye.
Alex?
Yes.
Marjorie?
Yes.
Charlie?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion carries.
Thank you, Ashley.
We don't even have a DEP permit yet, right?
No, so we can't issue until we receive that DEP permit
Right.
number. And if there's any further information the DEP requires, we'll have to furnish that.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you for
Thank you.
coming.
Thank you.
Sleep.
Are those the revised?
Those the revised plans?
These are plans for Baloo?
Yeah, 39. Yeah, yeah.
to me as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, now calling the 6:15 hearing, Richard J. Ballou Jr. and Amy McDonald Ballou, 39 Kim Path. Propose raise and replace existing single-family dwelling with a driveway modifications and Title V septic system upgrade. Representative, BSS Design. This is a notice of intent.
Those are the revised.
Thank you.
I'm Andrew Garraway, registered landscape architect, Yarmouth Port Design Group. I'm also covering for Tom Bunker from BSS Design. I'm, by the way, a former employee of BSS Design, so.
I apologize, I don't know what happened with, when we had put PDFs into a zip file, for some reason I could not get them.
Okay, I have hard
downloads.
copies. I don't know if you can see it from where I'm.
I just wouldn't be able to put it up on the screen, that's all. They've got the plans in front of them, so it's not a,
I think I need it in front of me, though.
I can look on with Paul, it's fine.
I'll share.
Yeah.
So this project is not in a buffer zone. It is simply in the flood zone. So that's why we're before you. There's an existing house that is going to be raised and replaced. The existing house, as you can see in the picture. They're going to raise it and replace it. No additional bedrooms, so the septic system, the leaching system is going to remain the same. However, the septic tank is going to be replaced to position it in a better position so that it's far enough away from the foundation of the house, of the proposed house. This house is going to have a patio in the back. It gets near the flood zone line. The house is totally out of the flood zone, but the property itself has some flood zone within it. There's an existing shed in the kind of the south corner of the lot, and proposed patio that's right near the flood zone, actually crosses the flood zone line slightly, and a slight readjustment of the contour line in that location, and a little bit of fill just to kind of balance things out on the left three-car kind of deep parking space that is currently there on Shore Drive. The patio is being drained to a channel drain that kind of runs through the middle of the patio. So the area that shows the fire pit is going to be pitched toward the house, and then from the house toward the channel drain that runs through the middle of the patio. That will be collected into a dry well. And also, we're going to be adding dry wells for the roof runoff. And so the end result is that we're not going to be contributing into the flood zone with a significant amount of fill and not with any significant amount of runoff as well. I'm not sure what else you need to know. It's kind of a different project for me because I'm used to doing mitigation in buffers, and it's like I don't know what to do to comply other than make sure that we take care of the runoff. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and maybe Drew can help out a little with how we're meeting the standards.
We start with commissioners?
Sure.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the commissioners first? I believe it said somewhere in the narrative that it was 2,000 square feet of land subject to coastal flooding on the lot.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of point out, whoops, I'm going to kind of point out where the flood zone is.
Is that U-shaped line?
Right here, this
Yes.
U-shaped line,
Mhm.
everything
Right.
on that side of it. So it's a very small lot. I'll have to look at the engineer's plan. Yeah, it's an 8,000 square foot lot,
Right.
8,400 square foot lot, so it's very small. And the septic system has been applied for to the health department online, Tom told me.
And that's out of our jurisdiction.
Yes.
So, as in a previous job, this has to go before the zoning board of appeals.
Yes,
for
it's
variance.
scheduled for September 14th.
And the new proposed home is actually larger than the one, I know it's non-conforming.
Yes, I believe it is. I believe it is.
I'm
Yeah,
going from memory, but I think it was 23% of the lot coverage.
Yeah, the existing is 1792 and the proposed is 1882, so it's going from 21.33 to 22.4. Lot coverage allowed in this district is higher than that. I think it's 25. So that was one of the questions I had earlier when we were designing the patio and stuff, so.
So, as in a former hearing, what I'm really having trouble understanding is, how do you go before the zoning board when it clearly states in the regulations that you can't use square footage of land subject to coastal flooding to determine the footprint of the house? You've got to take that 2,000 feet out and then do that as a percentage coverage. I don't understand how this works, and maybe somebody can
Yeah,
explain that to me.
and unfortunately, I'm not the expert on that. and Tom's not here for the answer to that.
I believe
Yeah.
it was, and I'm going from memory because I've been poring over all these regulations. I think it's footnote 16
Yeah,
in 17431, maybe?
but is that a conservation?
No, that's a zoning issue.
Yeah, so
But-
I don't know why we're addressing it here, I guess is my question.
Well, what I'm concerned about is the development that's taking place either in land subject to coastal flooding or partial properties that are, because we all know that we have some serious issues with storm damage and flooding. So that's my concern.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I don't know, but I'm quite certain that BSS Design and their attorney Corain know the situation on that and are going to address it in the Zoning Board of Appeals.
And what was the date of that, the 15th?
14th, September 14th.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't ever go to the Zoning Board of Appeals meetings for what I do, so I'm unfamiliar with that and was not expecting to address it.
Okay. Any other questions from the commissioners? Charlie?
Nope.
Nope.
Nodding his head.
Drew, would you like to comment?
Not much more to add. I do think that the dry wells and the pervious surfaces for the driveways reconfiguration will certainly help to control runoff on the site, because I know this area in particular is subject to ponding and pooling of water, flood waters during heavy rain events, so you can see those measures. Drip strips, dry wells, and pervious driveways as part of the plan. So That was really my biggest concern and why I felt that this should be a notice of intent and that's subject to conditioning, so that those pervious surfaces can actually be conditioned in the permit to be just that. So, no other comments, and I would recommend to close an issue.
Okay, thank you. Anyone in the audience that would like to comment? Audience of one? No? Okay.
Sorry, just one other, issuance would also be based on any commentary from the Board of Health agent who was unable to provide comments prior to this hearing, so.
Okay. Okay. Then I'll entertain a motion.
I would recommend a negative determination.
Oh, it's a notice of intent. It's a notice of intent. So it'd be a close and issue motion.
Negative. I would recommend close an issue with the condition Board of Health information, or recommendations.
Okay.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Thank you, Marjorie. Any further discussion before I call for a vote?
We don't need to condition zoning approval, because obviously if they don't get zoning
No.
approval. Okay,
No.
okay.
I brought it up just as a matter of, I'm trying to understand how projects come here first, and we condition them. And then they go to zoning, and they're asking for a variance for that bylaw based on footnote 16. I don't understand how it's given, because the DEP has clearly said that land subject to coastal storm flow is a wetland. And it can't be used in the determination of the percentage of the lot coverage. You have to subtract that piece of property out of the parcel and then do your calculation. And then that calculation has to meet the bylaw. So if we're taking 2,000 square feet out of a 81 or 8,400 square foot lot, that doesn't leave a lot of room.
I'm thinking there's an exemption for under 10,000 square foot lots.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I think there-
It'll be taken up with zoning. I mean, that's.
Yeah,
It's a zoning thing.
I think that's what it
Our purview
is.
is not zoning, that's
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, I know there's an exemption for something for lots under 10,000 square feet, and I think that's what it might be.
Okay.
I'm not 100%
Perhaps.
sure on that, but that might be what it is.
I should go to that meeting. I might learn something. Any other discussion before I call for a vote? Okay, there being none, roll call. Tom?
Aye.
Thank you. Alex?
Yes.
Thank you. Marjorie?
Yes.
Thank you. Charlie?
Yes.
And I vote no. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I should put these in here.
Stacy, do you want these back? The revised plans, just keep them in the binder.
Have a good night, everyone.
Bye, you
Thank
too.
you. You too. This is typing this is the amended order coming up. right?
Yes, yeah.
Is that 618 or 621? Because mine's all over the place.
It's the spacing because of the way that's formatted got screwed up, so it's actually 618 is the time.
618,
Yeah.
okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay, now calling the 618 hearing for Richard T. Miller, 50 Coastline Drive, proposed amended order of conditions, DEP number 433084, for pool, patio, landscaping, and hardscaping, Representative Bayswater Development. This is a amended order of conditions. Is there someone?
Is anyone on the phone here to represent 50 Coastline Drive?
Yeah, Nick Kalanis is in.
Okay. Nick, the hearing was just called, so whenever you're ready.
Yeah, so basically what we're doing is we're just with the pre-existing, not pre-existing, but we're building the home right now, and they wanted to add on the pool area. I believe we had this up before he took it out, and then now he's adding it back in again. So I just submitted you the tentative landscape plan for right now. Is what we have.
Bringing up an email from an abutter who wanted to have some.
Okay, I'll start with commissioners.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. We'll start with questions or comments from the commissioners.
I'm sorry, we previously approved an order of conditions for the house, and then this is for the pool, is that right?
That's correct.
Without
Yes.
the pool.
So it's for the house footprint only, and in that order of conditions, there was a condition requiring submission of an amended order request to show the landscape and hardscape details, because they were absent in the first go-around. It just showed the footprint of the house, but no other details. So that's why this is before you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were there any issues for the house? The first plan?
Still under construction.
It's still under construction, so
Oh,
it's,
okay.
yeah, not finished yet, but.
It wouldn't be like a whole different filing for the pool?
Well, because they showed the entire work limit in the previous application. Like, it showed the footprint of the house, but also the work limit around the house, but no details about what was occurring within that work limit. So the order of conditions that was issued approved the house and the work limit, but with an amended order to show the details within that work limit for landscaping and hardscaping.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I wasn't here for the original, so I'm going to be very interested, Drew, in what your recommendations are.
I've got a couple of questions about, this is not only a pool, but it's also a spa, right?
Correct.
And I'm looking at where the pool equipment is located. That's off of the patio up near those dark American abrevieties that you're proposing. Is there some kind of a dry well to accept maintenance of this pool and spa?
Yeah, there will be dry wells placed throughout the property also towards the front. That's why we move the pool equipment up towards the front, towards the road, away from the coastal bank.
But none of it's depicted on the plan.
Correct. I believe there may have been some on the original one, Drew.
Oh, were there?
For the home
Okay.
itself.
Okay,
Well, yeah, for the home itself.
okay.
It's the order of conditions.
I'll have to go back and check. I don't have that plan in front of me right now.
I mean, there's not a whole lot of natives being planted around here. I mean, I get that this whole plan is about the hardscape, but
I've got the original plan on my laptop.
Yeah,
Are you
so,
even allowed to plant privet?
huh?
Are you even allowed to plant privet?
If it's available in nursery stock, I think there's different varieties of privet. I know that, there's one variety that nurseries don't carry anymore because of its capacity to spread, so I can't imagine that this is that variety.
Alright.
So I'm looking at the original plan. It doesn't show any dry well.
There's nothing on it,
Yeah,
no.
there's nothing on it. It's just blank space where the pool and patio are proposed.
Oh, on that side, okay.
Yeah.
We can get something to you for the drainage. Everything will be pitched, like I said, away from the bank towards Coastline Drive.
Anyone want to see another copy of the original?
I've got it on my laptop. I asked Stacy to send that to me today, or actually late last night. And what is the distance from the top of the coastal bank to the spa? Because I don't see that on the plan either.
Nick, did you hear that question?
Yeah, I don't have that offhand. I'm looking at the plan right now. I'm trying to think here. So we got 14. From top of Coastal Bank, you're probably looking at probably 80 to 100 feet.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
He said 80 to 100 feet. That can't be
80?
right, though, because the 50-foot is...
The 50 foot off of that, yeah, I'm just looking, I'm trying to decipher, because you got 14.1 off of the corner of the pool to the property line right there, just scaling that out. I don't have it exactly, because I don't have the full plan in front of me.
Right. Well, the 100-foot line is at the backside of the pool itself. I was just, I wanted to know how close that was to the top of the bank. And what is the elevation of that bank?
What is the elevation?
Can we determine that?
Let's see the existing plan again.
I mean, if I were standing down at the base of it,
In the interest of time, can we identify, it seems like there's a lot of information that we would want before voting to approve this. Can we list out what we would want to see and try to make a motion for a continuance? It's super late. Can we
yeah.
just figure out what we want to see next time and go from there?
Sure.
Is this not almost like the last plan? I mean, I'm looking at one plan versus the other. I'm trying to find out what the differences are. It seems to me that the space is done exactly the same footprint.
Yeah, it's a combined lot. So these two, this is
I think
the,
there's been almost imperceptible changes.
so this was the plan that was approved on the original notice of intent and order conditions.
Mm-hmm.
You can see the absence of all of this housekeeping.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's
So we sign.
why this amended order is filed, to provide these details, which this plan is lacking.
Was this supposed to be like a deck or was it a porch?
Yeah. proposed
So,
porch.
so then the structure's actually further back from the coastal bank than proposed?
It appears, yes. Well, they
This
have
would
the-
have, this would have been a porch,
Right.
and so it's not. This is a patio. So
Right.
actually, the house is further away from the coastal bank than was proposed.
Right.
Yeah.
That's enough for me to move on.
See where you sign there. You go to put it over that. And you can sign all of these.
So if I could just make a suggestion, what I think, just in the interest of absolute clarity, you've got the original plan, right? That shows the house footprint, it shows the planted dune area, it shows top of coastal bank, it shows the 50-foot and the 100-foot setback. Then you've got this revised landscape hardscape plan that doesn't show the 100-foot setback, doesn't show the bank. It's much more kind of, it's focused on just the hardscaping, which is fine, and that's the subject of the amended order, but I think to get a plan that combines the details of both, so you've got all of these hardscape elements, and then also showing the contour of the bank, the beach grass plantings, because none of that's shown here on this amended plan. So I think if you combine the two, you'll get the information that I think what I'm hearing you're asking for, and also include any dry well locations associated with the pool, because I know that was a question. So I think just getting a plan together that includes the original plan and all the surveying combined with this current plan and all the hardscaping details.
Okay, so you want the 100-foot buffer, so we have the coastal bank is on there, right there. You got the 50-foot buffer on there as well. You just don't have the 100-foot in the
Right.
the dry wells.
Is that,
Right.
yeah,
Yep.
yes.
Okay, so we'll get you the 100-foot buffer in the dry wells.
And you should show the mitigation, the area of the beach grass in between the extent of lawn.
The lawn and the coastal bank.
You want to show where that beach grass, because that's part of the mitigation that's required. So you definitely want to show that as well.
Is that on this plan?
No, it's on the original.
So you have the proposed grass on here. You see that line right there on that
Yeah,
plan?
it's on this, right here.
Oh, I'm sorry, I must be
Right
looking at a
into
different
there.
one. Okay, nope, you're right, I see it.
No, I see it.
Okay,
Yeah, that's there.
okay. All right,
Why does it taper up like that, though?
I have a different plan on display here, that's why I'm looking at something completely different.
How would you ever question him?
Too many
Yeah,
plans.
you don't, that's not the,
No, that's not the one that they have.
that's not the VSS,
Is the morning,
plan. I think that's the landscaper's plan, right?
That's correct, yeah.
the morning
Yeah.
light isn't, that's not native, is it?
What's that?
The morning light miscanthus?
I don't know the answer to that.
I don't think it is. I mean, at least within the 100-foot buffer, or 100-foot to a coastal bank, can we have some native plants? I mean, we're gonna be better off with root systems that are meant to be there. I don't know, I'm not impressed.
Any of these native? No, they're all ornamental.
I don't think so. Certainly not hydrangeas. Hydrangeas just suck up more water and need more watering.
Yep.
Is this not one of the lots where they're paying for major beach restoration?
Well, they're paying to keep the bank from eroding.
Right.
Because they're developing on top of the bank.
Right, but I mean, it goes all along down to, all the way to the South Cape Beach as far as the erosion road
Yeah,
and mitigation that people are paying to, including the town.
it's not mitigation, it's required
Well, in
by
other
the
words,
state.
The town is doing it as well to save the beach as
Yeah, but
well.
there's no structure at the town beach. This is all residential. That's why, because you can't armor your coastal bank anymore
I know,
after
but
post
you have
78.
pilings at South Cape Beach.
What's that?
You have pilings at South
Yeah,
Cape
pilings. It was like a kind of a hybrid approach to try and allow for,
Beach. Sand to be
Sand
caught
to-
behind those pilings.
Yes.
But it's saying,
yeah.
I need to be in the sand business.
I'm saying there's a major, but it is a restoration trying to keep sand on the beach.
Yes, yeah.
And you have an artificial barrier already there with a glass
So I'm just going to follow
barrier
your lead
that's
here.
already shown on the plan.
Right.
For each one of them, there's no need to go anyplace else except for right under you.
And you're so far away from the coastal bank, I don't understand.
Oh, wait. I apologize, sorry, John. Where? Oh, I'm just getting through substance and process here. I apologize, I'll
Nope.
get much better at this as
No
time
problem.
goes on.
So I think, in general, if a commissioner has an idea, you can put it out as a motion and then you vote on it. And if it doesn't pass the motion, you start over again. I mean, to sit here and argue back and forth about somebody's motion, just put the motion out there and let it be heard and voted on. And we can move on to finish the hearing.
All right, let me, I'll call for a motion, and let's see if it is up to speed.
I'd like to make a motion for continuance for 50 Coastline Drive, so that all of the amendments that Drew and Paul discussed can get into the next version of the plan. So, Nick, do you want it to be continued to the next hearing, or do I need to put the date in the motion?
The next hearing will be August 25th, and the next time slot would be 6:09 PM.
Okay, so continue to August
So
25th.
you just need those two, you just need the two things. I mean, we don't have much on there besides the dry wells, and need the dry wells and the 100-foot line.
Yes. And, yeah.
Okay, so for August 25th at 6:09 PM to show the dry wells and the measurements, and then I would like to add a good faith effort to add more native plantings to the plan.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Charlie. Any other discussion, brief or?
Just one other item, Nick. I was out at the site today, and I was out at the site yesterday, and the condition of the construction site, there's a tremendous amount of debris and litter around that area. And as a boilerplate condition in all of the order of conditions that we issue, we expect site cleanup to be done daily at each job site. And this current job site just had blowing strips of plastic, cans, bottles. It was just a mess. One of the worst construction sites I've seen in a long time in terms of debris and just stuff flying everywhere. And it's always windy in this location, so I really want to.
My contractor, he went down there today, later today, and cleaned it up.
Okay.
We are getting a lot too from next door as well.
Yeah,
Where 66 is building their pool house.
Okay, yeah, understood. And I'll certainly follow up with them as well. We just want to make sure that the site gets cleaned up on a daily basis until construction is
agreed.
complete. Yep, okay, thank you. No other comments, so, okay, no other discussion.
So we have the motion and seconded. No other discussions? Then I will call a roll call for the vote.
Thank you.
Tom?
Aye.
Alex?
Yes.
Marjorie?
Yes.
Charlie?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion carries. Ooh.
Stacy, may I borrow a pen?
So we're gonna, if it's okay to move on with this pre-post hearing agenda item and then wrap up the updates. We have a funding request, so just to give the background on this, I was approached by the Friends Group of the Mashpee National Wildlife Refuge to see what could be done about one of the more recent pollinator gardens that's been installed at the entrance to the Jehu Pond Conservation Land off of Red Brook Road. And The issue is, and especially it's not just for this location, but many locations where it doesn't have a water source, a lot of these plantings are suffering as a result. And because of the remoteness of this location and the likelihood that we're going to experience, extended periods of drought moving forward, the request is to see if this could be a spot where a water hookup could be put in place, just to have, readily available water source to keep the pollinator gardens going. So I reached out to the water department, the water district, to talk to Andy Marks, and he did give me he said it is entirely feasible to hook up to town water there. To create a well would be significant expense, and really, if we're gonna look for a water source, it makes the most sense, in his opinion, to connect up to town water to do so. So he did give a breakdown of fees involved. It's I think it's $1,550 for the fee from the water district to do the work, and then an additional $1,200 to buy the equipment necessary to do the work, and then there is additional cost for labor, which DPW has helped out in installing a similar water source at the pollinator gardens and community gardens across the way. So all told, you're looking at about $3,000 worth of cost to get this done. And in speaking with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and Tom Eagle, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service may have some funding. This hasn't been finalized yet, but conversations, they may have some funding they could have go towards this, and maybe it would be a split cost between, if the commission were to authorize the release of funding to help pay for this water connection so we can irrigate the community gardens in this location. I'm asking for an amount of $1,500 from our lands and maintenance account to go towards this. And is there anyone on the line from the Friends Group? Doesn't seem so. They were going to try and join tonight's meeting, but apparently weren't able to, so.
A couple of people on there.
Did he want to talk to us?
No.
Oh, okay.
I don't think anyone's on the line from the Friends Group, but I
I
do
just
say
have a
other
question
things.
about this, Drew. Do
Yep.
you, is there enough money in the account to do the whole project if necessary? Like, could we vote up to $3,000 and
Yes,
then?
I was going to mention that. There is.
Okay.
There is sufficient funding to cover the whole cost, and we could always get reimbursed from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service once that gets vetted out on their end,
Great.
as far as the availability of funds, so.
So do you need us to make a vote to authorize the funding?
Yes. Yeah.
So can I make a motion that we authorize up to $3,000 to be spent for the pollinator meadow here,
Yeah.
Okay,
for the water connection?
thank you. Is there a second to that?
Of course. Second.
Of course. Marjorie, thank you. Any further discussion? No? Call for a vote. Tom?
Aye.
Alex?
Yes.
Marjorie?
Yes.
Charlie?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion carries.
And just a couple of last quick updates. Chopchick Bog, they completed the ground penetrating radar survey of the entire bog surface, both bog cells, and revealed your typical depth of sand, 1 to 2 feet of sand. In some areas, some less than that. And then in some of the deepest part of the bogs, up to 18 feet deep of bog peat. Yep, yeah, it's like, that was surprising to hear that. But anyway, the ground penetrating radar revealed your typical bog to groundwater to peat to sand layers. So what this does is it helps to focus the actual wetland construction and restoration efforts to where the peat is closest to the surface to take advantage of the groundwater and wetland conditions. So it'll help dictate depth of excavation and focus of excavation in areas where the peat is most prevalent. So it's always a necessary step in bog to wetland restoration. So that was just done. And we're working on a revised schedule for the completion of this project, which we're still looking at roughly around early to midwinter of 2023, when construction should actually be completed. And all the final planning and permitting will take place between now and then. And there was, at the selectmen's meeting, I did hear about some upcoming updates, some community outreach for the local comprehensive plan that Mary Wagan had detailed. I don't remember specifically what the entities, the groups that they're reaching out to, but they're kind of like neighborhood associations and civic groups throughout town, and I know that all of that information is on the LCP website. So, and that's
Okay,
it.
Great. There are no other additional topics, Alex, so I think we can
Make a motion to
maybe
close?
wrap it up.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Third?
Best motion of the night?
Tom?
Aye.
Alex?
Yes.
Marjorie?
Yes.
Charlie?
Yes.
And I
Thank you,
vote
everybody.
yes as well.
Nicely done.
We got to sign
Long
things,
one.
right?